Geek Out! Hey, this is a Geek Out PSA. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
And we are talking with Dani Colman about her Kickstarter campaign for Couture, a comic book anthology inspired by fashion from 1910 and on. 15 superstar artists, including a certain somebody whose initials are HC, but now we've made HMFC. You'll hear it in the episode.
Yeah, a lot.
The Kickstarter is live now. It's quite. There's nothing like it. It's one of the most unique comic book concepts I've ever heard. And again, just like the talent behind this thing and the support behind it is extraordinary. So definitely jump in at the ground level, help this thing get made, and get the book yourself. So without much further ado, here's Dani Colman talking about Couture. And joining us this week, we've got Dani Colman. She's got her Kickstarter that goes live. Well, it's live now. When we'll have the links in the description and everything for the Couture, the comic collection. Dani, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, as a brief overview, how did this is a comic book anthology inspired by fashion. How did this all kind of come about?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Whichever you're more comfortable with.
So fashion and comics has been an interest of mine for a while. I used to write for an online lifestyle magazine, and I covered the entertainment beat. So I did film, television, comics, and the magazine had a fashion focus. So in the interest of trying to get an interview series going, I thought I would interview some creators about the fashion in their comics. And the interview series never ended up going live, but I met some really awesome people and ended up running a panel at Emerald City Comic Con called Fashion, Comics, and the Rise of Geek Chic. And I had Alex DeCampi, Jamie McKelvey, Kevin Wadder, Babs Tarr, a really good group of panelists. And I got home from Emerald City and realized that I'd come to know these amazing artists. And I was right at the point in my own sort of comics, my own entry into the comics industry, that I really wanted to have some of my own work out there and where people could read it. And I had what at the time seemed like a really crazy idea. I'm not sure that's not still the case. But I tracked down the people who had been on my panel, whom I'd interviewed, sent feelers out to other people who I knew had either drew sort of particularly stylish characters or who I knew had an interest in fashion and style. And next thing I knew, I had a book. Well, a book in progress. And
it's, without giving the game away, or unless you want to completely give the game away, it's your call. So this anthology, what is it? The anthology itself entail?
So there are 15 short comics, all of them written by me, each one drawn by a different artist. And each comic, the story draws its inspiration from an iconic fashion collection. So they're not stories about fashion, but they're stories that pull aesthetically and thematically from some of the more groundbreaking garments and collections that walked down the runway in the past 100 years or so.
Oh, so would it be kind of a mix of like nationality in terms of the, or is it more kind of European fashion or across the area?
It's a little of everything, honestly. I tried to go as diverse as I possibly could. The history of fashion has kind of been dominated by the French and in the latter half of the 20th century, American fashion. But more recently, there have been couturiers from Asia, from India, from South America, sending collections down the runway. So I really tried to pull from as diverse a spread of collections as I possibly could.
Oh. Now, you've got a whole superstar kind of stable, bullpen of artists on this one. You've got Howard fucking Chaykin.
Yes, I have Howard motherfucking Chaykin.
His Christian name.
The funny thing is,
confirmation
I tried
name.
to say his name normally, and it always comes out Howard motherfucking Chaykin.
That works.
I'm pretty sure I've addressed him as such.
Yeah,
and he responded.
That's me.
That's what my mother called me.
Please, my father was Howard motherfucking Chaykin.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, Howard was a hoot. I had never met him before Rose City Comic Con this year. I knew his work from Satellite Sam, from American Flag, from a couple of other things here and there. And I knew anecdotally that he had a very keen interest in fashion. And I was I viewed Rose City Comic Con as a place to do a round of recruiting, because I knew that some of the artists who were on my wish list would be there. And at a certain point, so Howard was there because Matt and Kelly Sue had their whole sort of milk-fed team members shindig thing going. Right. And at a certain point, and I swear to God I was not drunk at the time, I thought, well, why the fuck not? So I went up to Howard, who at that point I had met. So during the show, I went up to Howard, who I'd met once before the previous night at Matt and Kelly Sue's house, and said, here's what I'm doing. Do you want to be a part of it? And he said, absolutely.
Now,
and I said, all right.
That's, I mean, words so simple. My God.
He's just like one of us.
Now, in terms of collaborations, was it, when it came to assigning artists, or did the artists kind of have free reign to choose which short story? Did you kind of co-develop the stories within the anthology?
So I came up with all the basic premises for the stories myself. I knew that I wanted to have the book ready for at least part of convention season next year. And so in order to do that, I needed to have as much conceptually in place as possible. So it kind of depended on who came on board and when. So for a couple of the early, for the first couple of people who said yes to this crazy idea, I sent them the spreadsheet of the stories and said, here, have your pick.
Nice.
And then there were others where I had strong feelings about what their style would be a particular fit for, and so I sent them a more sort of carefully curated selection.
It's kind of like the way that Dave Grohl did the Probot album. Because each song he had a different lead singer from like a classic 80s metal, and he kind of just did the same thing. He like did an instrumental and kind of like an overview of what he wanted the song to sound like, and then just sent it off and was like, have fun, write lyrics. And then they came back and recorded them.
Well, that's cool. Yeah.
Well, and ultimately I want this book to be enjoyable for everyone to work on, so I wanted very much for my collaborators to feel as though they were engaging with the material, and they have the freedom to put their own stamp on it artistically, because they are the artists. If I wanted to micromanage, then I would be trying to do the drawing, and it would be a very bad book.
So in terms of, how long have you been sitting on the project itself? You had mentioned that you had the panel at Emerald City back in April, and of course Rose City with Howard motherfucking Chaykin would be the would be the end of the summer. How long has this kind of really been brewing as an anthology?
I think about 6 months. So the first time I thought, well, I really want to do a book was right after Emerald City, and a lot of this sort of prep work happened in the next couple of months, and then the first round of sort of serious recruiting was at HeroesCon that year. Because again, I knew that a number of people who had been on my panel, a number of people that I had become friends with over the course of many shows were going to be there. And so it was a good opportunity to sort of test the idea out on real professionals and see if they thought it was insane.
But I mean, you got 15 artists. You got Howard. Who are some of the other artists that you have in addition to? It's just going to be this.
We only get so many motherfucking in an episode.
I think we'll crack.
The MPAA comes down on you.
Yeah. How many Chaykins?
Too many Chaykins.
No, I have a really amazing team. I have. Actually, let me pull up the list, because the terrible thing is it's such a good team that my brain does not have space for all the names. So, who have I got? I've got Valentine Delandro, who draws Bitch Planet. Marguerite Sauvage, who does DC Bombshells and Faith.
Okay.
Justin Greenwood, who does The Fuse and Stumptown. Jen Bartel, Comfort Love and Adam Withers. Tony Parker. Kevin Wadder doing interstitials. Taki Soma is doing a story, and Robbie Rodriguez as well.
Wow, we just had Tony on, I guess, last week to talk about Mayday. So that's just a murderer's row of yeah.
And that's just the people who have said absolutely yes. I have some people who are still trying to figure out scheduling and so on, whose names I will not drop yet because it would be tempting fate. But there may be some announcements mid-campaign.
Now, in terms of the campaign itself, could you kind of tease some of the stretch goals that you kind of have in place for the Kickstarter's launch?
I could,
but I won't.
No, I will, because I know that one of them is going out with the press releases tomorrow. If we clear our goal by a certain amount, Kieran Gillen will be writing a prose story for the anthology.
Sweet.
You should have seen the
I
face
spoke for
on
Sam because he couldn't speak.
I was rendered speechless, dumbstruck.
That's his future ex-wife.
Yeah. Kieran Gillen? No, I think you're getting that confused with Karen Gillen. Yeah.
No, they're all. Every Gillen.
I've seen them interact on Twitter before, and it was like a singularity of Gillens.
Yeah, no, sorry, that was my fault. Still an exciting.
You know, I would if Kieran Gillen,
future ex-spouse.
If Kieran Gillen asked, I would think about it.
You know, you would marry for the money.
Get some of that wicked and divine money. Woo. But in terms of backer rewards as well, not just stretch goals.
Well, obviously the sort of central reward for the whole thing is a copy of the book. We really want the book to be sort of an art object in itself. So it's going to be a hardcover edition. We have a cover graphic designed by silhouette artist Jordan Monsell, and it just looks gorgeous. And then so that's going to be available at $45 or $40 if you are one of the first 25 backers to pledge. So get on in there. And then we also have custom jewelry designed by Optimistical Studios. Stylist and designer Dani Valnavia is doing a full set of 15 enamel pins, one for each story, and her designs are so beautiful. It kind of blows my mind a little. And we have sort of the usual array of prints, postcards, a digital behind the scenes volume that'll talk about how we got from fashion to comic and show some behind the scenes sketches and so on.
It's cool. Now, how long does is the campaign slated to run?
It will be running through the I believe the 18th of November.
Well, sounds good. Now, of course, Dani, something that we ask everybody that comes on the show.
Oh dear.
Brian didn't prep you. What are you currently geeking out over?
How long do we have?
Take all the time you need. Sometimes that's the bulk of the
sometimes.
I feel like our interview last week was half an hour of interview and then like an hour of what they're geeking out.
If you happen to touch on any of the things that the three of us love, this could go on for like an hour and a half.
She's like, well, I love The Who.
Yeah.
Jake's like, ah!
Yeah.
I'm currently absolutely obsessed with Westworld.
Yes, that's me.
I have not yet watched the newest episode because I have been busy trying to do Kickstarter video. Yay! But I am so excited by this show. I love westerns. I love sci-fi. I love the whole sort of Isaac Asimov. At what point do they feel? And yeah, I am eating up every second of that show.
As soon as we're like done for the night, I think I'm going to pop in the most recent episode.
Had you been a fan of the original Michael Crichton film and Future World?
No, I'd actually never seen it, and the only reason that Westworld was on my radar was because I met Ed Brubaker at WonderCon this year, and I was with Brian, and I tell you what, the two of them talking to each other, it was like an episode of The Twilight Zone, because Ed is Brian in 4 years. It's the standard it's the default Sims model for comic writers, bald, middle-aged, glasses, goatee.
Yeah.
They look like that. But Ed and Brian, it's creepy. But anyway, we got on really well, and he at the time was sort of deep in the writers' room for Westworld, and so he told us a lot about what was going on and what it was like working on it. And so that was what put it on my radar.
I had initially that was the first time I actually met Brian. Now that I think about it, I think it actually predated the him and Jeremy coming on to talk Blackjack Ketchum. Was at WonderCon, and I also talked to Ed there, and yeah, he was just coming out of it, and he was like, yeah, the thing about writers' rooms, like, it means that all of your ideas are open for criticism, and writers aren't necessarily known for being open for criticism. It made him really rethink the creative process quite a bit. Yeah. But yeah, anything in addition to HBO's Westworld?
Again, it's a very long list because I geek out about so many things. I just devoured all 3 volumes of Southern Bastards, which you hooked me up with at
New York.
At New York.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized how little of it I had read prior, because I'd read, I think, the first 2 issues and then just let it fall by the wayside. I don't read single issues all that well. I don't retain information for an entire month particularly well. And so I'd been waiting for it to come out in trade, and then just it had fallen off my radar. How are we about spoilers in this forum?
This is okay for all our listeners at home. This is your chance for Southern Bastards spoilers to read Southern Bastards.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead. Go full on.
You've given the spoiler warning.
Okay, right. I hadn't even got as far as Earl Tubbs' death.
Oh wow.
And that I'm on the plane and I'm exhausted and I'm starting to come down with the con crud, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I can keep reading. What the fuck just happened?
Yeah, it's like
I read comics insanely quickly. I read most things really quickly, actually, but comics especially. And so it's very, very rare for me to get to a point in a comic and have to sort of flip back and forth between the 2 pages 3 or 4 times to go, did I really read what I... No, that's not... Really? Yes? It did? No. Okay. But now, where do we... How? What? Huh? It was it's very, very rare for anyone... since Hitchcock to successfully pull off killing off Marion Crane 20 minutes in. And somehow Jason Aaron and Jason Latour managed it. And it took me completely by surprise, and I am 100% in love with it. And I got to the end of volume 3, and had I been able to open the window of the plane, I would have chucked it out because I was so frustrated at there not being a volume 4 right there.
I feel like that's a good what's the word?
Reaction?
Yeah, probably the appropriate reaction. But no, I mean like a good review.
Yeah, a quote on the book. It's I wanted to toss it out of the plane.
Yeah, I'll pass that one along to Jason.
Next
time I talk to him.
That's good.
But Southern Bastards is one of my favorite ongoing series currently at Image, and I was so glad that they officially. I mean, I had known about it for a couple months, but I was so glad that they announced that it was coming back at New York, because it had never officially been canceled, and it ends on such like you were saying, such a big cliffhanger. And I mean, the idea of the main character getting killed by the end of the first arc just throws the whole thing in disarray. Right.
It's amazing, and it's interesting for me because I have a lot of family in rural Kentucky. Like a lot of family. They came over, if not on the Mayflower, then whatever ship was right behind it. Claimed some land, bred like bunnies, and they've been there ever since. And I've been down there a few times for family reunions, and they are lovely, lovely people. They really are. But it's such a different universe than what I know, because I'm a city girl. I grew up in London, and I've been in San Francisco for the past several years. And so it's weird to sort of see bits and snatches of what little I remember from my visits to rural Kentucky in Southern Bastards, and not necessarily the bad stuff, just the sort of the very, very different attitude towards life that you have living in the rural South than you do like in a city in California.
Yeah, it's quite we live right outside of DC ourselves, and you don't have to go that far to suddenly find yourself in the country, like in Virginia, or in even, especially West Virginia is even more of a culture shock. In fact, we're kind of entering that favorite time of the year where I like to kind of make the drive down the Shenandoah and get some like apple pie and take in the sights. But no, it is a completely different world, culturally speaking. But now, in terms of, to take it back to Couture a bit, what was some of your writing influences when putting the story together? Certainly, you've mentioned all the fashion influences, but in terms of the short stories themselves, what were you kind of drawing from?
A lot of it came from researching the fashion. I knew that I was onto something good when I looked at a fashion collection, and it sort of sparked my brain to make a connection to something else. So, for example, there's one story that's being drawn by Jed Doherty. That's no, wait, sorry. Not drawn by Jed Doherty. There's one story that actually is as of yet unclaimed. But the fashion inspiration is a dress by a couturier named Charles James, and his dresses were very sculptural. They were literally as much works of sculpture as they were clothes. And they were beautiful, and they had these amazing forms, but they were also impossible to walk in. Once you put one of these things on, you could not move. And it was recently sort of brought out for an exhibition at the Met, and one of the curators was talking about how it was just such an aggressive dress to try and present, because it was so heavy it would break any hanger, and it was so big that you couldn't see where you were going when you were carrying it. And it made me think, well, when is a dress not really a dress? Is it when you can't wear it? Is it when you can't move with it? And so then from there I went to sort of when is a thing not the thing it's supposed to be? And it reminded me of an urban legend in the field of architecture about an architect who designed a library, and shortly after opening, the building had to be condemned because it was sinking, because in his enthusiasm, the architect had forgot to account for the weight of the books. Mm. So, when is a library not a library? When it can't hold any books.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I just watched an episode of How I Met Your Mother where I don't remember who it is. Probably it's
the exact same.
Yeah, it's probably Ted, because he's the architect, but he's like...
It's the episode where Ted has decided to form his own architecture firm, and he's getting cold feet about calling any clients.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I was like, wait, this sounds familiar. I'm like rewatching that show from the beginning, so...
There's another story that's kind of similar that involves a bell tower in Cambridge. And again, when is a bell tower not a bell tower? When it doesn't have a bell in it. Mm. So that sort of... So from there, it was kind of a very natural progression for my central character to be an architect, and for the story to be about this architect's reach exceeding his grasp.
Oh. How you mentioned that there's like approximately a century's worth of fashion from all over the world. About how across these 15 stories, how far does it go back?
I think the earliest is from about 1910.
Oh wow!
It's inspired by the work of a designer named Emily Louise Flöger, who was actually Gustav Klimt's muse. Most of the amazing sort of textures and patterns that you see in Klimt's paintings were drawn directly from Flöger's garments.
Will there be any kind of supplemental material, like back matter? I mean, I'm probably not because I mean, the some of the history behind this is quite fascinating. Because I feel like most people just don't know it. I mean, going that far back.
I mean, there was a lot digging in that I mean, I have loved fashion for years, but there was a lot sort of digging in during my research that I just didn't know. But yes, we're going to have a whole separate book, and it's going to be available as a digital download at pledge levels of, I think it might be as low as $5. Where you get the digital download of the companion volume, which is called Atelier. And If the campaign goes really, really well, then we are looking at turning Atelier into a physical companion volume as one of the stretch goals. But the campaign would have to do pretty damn well for that, because it adds a lot of expense to print a whole nother book.
The just because we're recording this interview before the Kickstarter's live, what is that primary goal?
30,000.
30,000. Okay. All right. Sounds good.
It sounds terrifying if you're sitting where I am.
Well, see, Sam has just 30,000 lying around to do nothing with.
I don't know. I just got my own apartment, so.
Oh, sorry. 25,000.
Yeah.
It's Arlington. 28. But yeah, well, Dani, is there anything that you would like to kind of plug or kind of cover about the Kickstarter itself before we, before we sign off?
Just I would like to encourage as many people as possible to back, and to ideally back at the pledge where you can get the book, because it's going to be, and I say this not out of arrogance, but because I am so humbled by the amazing collaborators that I have. It's going to be a really, really beautiful book. And I don't know that there's going to be much out there like it. So I hope very much that we succeed and that we are able to create the book that we want to create. But obviously we can't do that without the help of backers and of people who love fashion and who love comics.
I mean, again, all the luck, and you've got a superstar team. You've got so much support behind this, and we're happy to help with the signal boost. We're happy to, we always love having Kickstarters on, because then we're directly, helping creators put something out there, especially something as unique and beautiful as this. So, we're looking forward to seeing how this goes and to actually holding the product.
And we have a 100% track record of...
Don't jinx us! God damn it!
Why would you say that? Why would you say that out loud?
I will just, to follow up on Chris's statement, we have been successful with funding programs in our past.
Forever the salesman.
So we're looking to continue that streak. So,
Yeah.
So Dani, thanks again for coming on the show, and to all our listeners at home, all the links to the Kickstarter are in the episode description. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday, and you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.